Okay, so today we're getting started with babka, and first step is to make the filling. So I'm taking a hand mixer and some soft butter, and we're going to mix together, in this case, some cinnamon, some sugar, some powdered sugar, and in a few minutes we're going to be putting in a little drop of milk, probably about a teaspoon. This is half of the batch that's listed on the recipe. Since we're only making a 1.5 pound batch, I figured half a pound or half a batch of filling would be more than enough. If you're making the chocolate filling, you could probably make even less than half, probably even a quarter of a batch, because it really won't be much that you need to fill a babka. So the filling has come together. Okay, time for babka. This is the flour, the salt, the sugar, and the yeast. We're going to bring this together very much like brioche. Then we have our dry ingredients here. I'm going to bring in my egg and my milk. And we're going to put that together as a dough. And then that is going to have butter incorporated in it. This is another enriched dough. So it's going to take getting the dough started, give the gluten a chance to get a head start, and then we're going to work that butter into the dough. Let's get all the wet and the dry combined. Okay, at this point I've sped up the video so that you can just see I'm working in the butter into the dough, very much like we did with brioche. And you just work it in, and when you see the butter disappear, put in another chunk of butter until it's all incorporated into the dough. You're probably going to spend somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes kneading this dough to do it by hand. It takes a little while, there's no doubt, but the results are worth it. If you do have a KitchenAid mixer, feel free to go and put this in the KitchenAid and let it run on medium speed with the butter, little by little, work the butter in, and it will eventually come together as a nice smooth dough. Okay, so we worked the dough for about 12 to 14 minutes. Got it thoroughly mixed. And we're going to be putting this dough, this is the babka dough, onto a sheet of parchment paper. Now, I'm going to put this out onto parchment, and then I'm going to refrigerate it. I'm going to flatten it down so that when I get ready to do the next stage, which will be filling this dough, that it'll be already partially rolled out. I won't have to roll it out quite as far. So this dough is very, very soft because of all that butter, and there's no way that you could really work with it the way it is. But once we refrigerate it, it'll firm up. So I'm going to spread this out into a rough rectangle, just kind of getting it close to where I want it to be anyway. Just save myself some effort. Okay, so that's a good start. We'll get that into the refrigerator to chill. When we come back out, we're going to be rolling this out a little bit further, probably almost the size of my cutting board here. And I've already made some filling. On the recipe for babka, you will see that there's a recipe for two different fillings, a cinnamon filling and a chocolate filling. I've chosen to go with the cinnamon filling, and this will be spread on, and I'll show you how to use that in just a few minutes. So we'll be back in a moment. Okay, so time to shape the babka. We're going to take our paper off. Get a little bit of flour. Remember, when peeling away your paper, always peel away, pulling really low so it comes right off. Otherwise, you'll tear the dough. Okay, a little bit more flour, and we're going to roll this out. This makes a single fairly large 1.5 pound loaf of babka. So I'm not going to worry too much about this little hole right there. I'm just going to go ahead and press it down, and I'm going to just keep rolling. Now what I want to do is I want to roll this out to a rectangle. As much as I can. So like this area here, this thick, I'm just going to push with one hand to kind of to find some corners. If you detect that it's sticking at all, if you think there might be any area that's sticking, go back over here, grab a little bit of flour, toss it underneath just to make sure. Now this dough is cold right now. We want to keep it that way as much as we possibly can. If it gets warm, it's going to start getting sticky. Okay, I'd say we're about even thickness everywhere. Run my hands underneath it, make sure it's loose from the surface. Now, I'm not worried about these imperfections. These imperfections won't hurt a thing. Now, what I've got ready here is I've got a loaf pan, and the loaf pan has some paper in it. I put paper down the sides, and I put it on the bottom as well. I just want to make sure that it doesn't have an opportunity to stick. The ends are not covered, but those I can go down here with a spatula and I could loosen if needed. So I'm going to keep that nearby, so we're ready for that. Next thing is our filling. Now, the filling that's listed on the recipe, I made half a batch. I figured I didn't need more than half. It's only a 1.5 pound loaf. And this is the cinnamon filling. So I'm going to spread this around. I'm just going to spread it evenly. This is a mixture of sugar, powdered sugar, soft butter, and a little bit of milk. I think I put in about a teaspoon of milk just to kind of break things up and make things a little bit more spreadable. So I'm going to spread this out evenly. Now you notice I'm leaving a little space up here that's uncovered, and I'm going to do that intentionally because I want to make sure that when I roll this up that it's going to be able to stick. See, a babka is built initially a lot like cinnamon rolls, but the big difference here is that we're not going to make cinnamon rolls. We're going to be making one loaf of babka. Now, babka is very similar in cinnamon rolls as well, in that it has a very rich dough full of eggs and butter and sugar, and it has milk in it, so it's got all the enrichments that we would see in any highly enriched bread. Babka, traditionally, here in America, we'll see it a lot at Jewish bakeries, but that doesn't mean it's Jewish. It just means that it is prized by the Jewish bakeries, and the immigrants who came over during the 1840s to 1890s from Eastern Europe, specifically places like Poland and the Czech Republic, or what was Czechoslovakia. So today the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia. These are all countries where, and Russia of course, is where Jewish immigrants came from, and they brought their breads with them, and the babka was one of those. So I'm going to start down here at the end, and we're going to start by rolling up this dough. And I start little by little. I want to get a nice snug interior winding to this roll. So I take my time. It's going to come a point here where it's going to become big enough where I can roll it with my whole hand. But initially, I want to do it just carefully with my fingers. Just take it easy. There we go. It's not that I'm trying to roll it really tight. What I'm really trying to do is just trying to make sure that it doesn't have any real loose spots in it. Pull this on down. All right, I'm going to get a little bit of water, and we're going to close this up. Okay, so I'm going to moisten this area that is not covered, just to make sure that that sticks and stays fairly closed so it doesn't unravel. We're going to roll that up so it forms just a nice snug roll. All right, here comes the next part. We're going to take a knife. We're going to go ahead and cut this whole thing completely horizontally. All right, and as you can see, we have many layers. So now we're going to do what we call a classic Russian braid. Okay, so we have these layers. We want these layers to be exposed. We want them to look really good. So I'm going to take my initial end here. I'm just going to crisscross one over the other. Now I'm going to take this one on my left, and I'm going to flip it over the one on the right. Then I'm going to, basically what I'm doing is I'm giving it a twist. I'm going to take my right one and go under my left one. And now my right one go under my left one and over my right one. And all we're doing is we're just, instead of just giving it a straight twist, we're just assisting it to give it that beautiful appearance. Now we can squash it a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to put this in the loaf pan and try to maintain as much of the integrity as we can. All right, so I've got this in the loaf pan, as you can see. This needs to proof now. And I'm going to take some plastic. Little plastic, and I'm just going to rest it over top of this, and this is going to proof. It's going to need to proof for quite a while. I want to see this come up at least halfway to 2/3 of the way up this loaf pan. I want to see it fill the loaf pan and look really good. Maybe instead of plastic, I'll take this paper that I had. I'm just going to place it over top. This particular loaf pan has a lid, so I'm just going to sort of set that on top to kind of keep things contained. And this is going to proof at room temperature. Probably going to be about 2 hours. Probably about 2 hours. But I'm going to come back, I'm going to set a timer for 2 hours and check on it and see how it looks. If it takes longer, so be it. That'll just mean that it'll be a better babka. You want to make sure this proofs sufficiently, so let it go long enough to do the job. And really, nobody in the house will mind once this starts baking, because the whole house is going to smell like cinnamon. It's going to smell great. So we're going to let it proof as long as we need to. If it needs to go 3 hours, I'll let it proof 3 hours. But remember, it's only about 65 degrees in here. It's not as warm as a proofer, so we're not going to get quite the performance that we would out of a proof box. But by the time we're done proofing, this will look about double the size that it is right now. Okay, we'll see you in a little while when it's done proofing. Here's a cinnamon babka, fresh out of the oven. Looking forward to seeing your babkas. Try the Russian braid, see what you think of it. It's a great way to keep these layers exposed and to make everything look its best. And we're gonna let this cool down before we dive into it. It's a little too hot to eat right now. The reason why it's so long and thin is, of course, because of the loaf pan that I was using. I was using a really long loaf pan. If you buy a foil loaf pan at the market, it will be shorter and it'll be a little taller. But this loaf pan gave me a longer, skinnier loaf. So have fun and post your pictures. We'll look forward to seeing them.